Isquis Chichawasket, Pamela Barnes. It's my honor today to formally welcome you to the Syilx territory. And so before I do that, I want to share with you a little bit about what our lands mean to us. In this part of Turtle Island, which is how we refer to North America, the sharing of our lands with peoples from other places is fairly recent. It's about 200 years. Where other parts of Turtle Island, that history goes back 500 years, 1,000 years, depending on where you're speaking of. But here it's fairly recent. And with those coming together of different peoples from different places, came some new ideas about human relationship to the land, and that are very different from our traditional viewpoint about our relationship to the lands. And so one of those concepts is the idea of ownership, human ownership of land. And we as Syilx people see ourselves more of borrowing these lands from our great-great-great-great-grandchildren. We look at things in 7 generations. And there's a very big difference between those two ideas. So if I own this necklace, I can sell it, I can trade it, I can give it away. It's mine, I can do what I want. It's up to me how I choose to care for it. I can take great care, or I can toss it aside. Again, it's mine. I can do what I want with it. If I borrow this necklace, everything changes in those relationships. I cannot sell it. I cannot trade it. I cannot give it away. And there's an expectation that I take the very best care possible. And when I leave it or return it, that at least it's in the same condition I found it in, and if at all possible, in better. So those ideas are very different. And it's with that understanding of our relationship to these lands that we first welcomed people to the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx people. And so it's with that understanding that today I welcome you to the traditional unceded and currently occupied territory of the Syilx people, with the gentle reminder that none of us, including ourselves as Syilx people, are taking the very best care possible of these lands for all of our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so on and so forth. Lim Lim.
So nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll dive right in. For those of you who haven't joined us before, my name is Victoria Verge, and I'm the Education Coordinator of Adult Programming here at the Kelowna Art Gallery. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and staff, I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'll begin tonight's talk by acknowledging that the land on which the gallery stands is the unceded traditional territory of the Okanagan Syilx people. We're very thankful to be here on their land. Just a few housekeeping rules before I dive in. There will be time for questions at the end of tonight's talk, so feel free to type those into the chat bar whenever you think of them, and we will happily answer them near the end of our session. It's also important to note that today's lecture is being recorded and will be available for future viewing on our website if you know of anyone who'd like to check it out later on. So today, the Kelowna Art Gallery is pleased to welcome featured artist Jay Bundy Johnson, whose work is presented in our current permanent collection exhibition, A Year From Now. He's joining us from his studio today, and we'll get the chance to take a little sneak peek, I think later on behind the scenes, as he gives us a brief look into his studio space and chats about his unique artistic practice. A little bit about Jay before I hand it over to him. He's a Vancouver-based sculptor, musician, and media artist. Since graduating from Emily Carr Institute of Art and Design in 1993, Johnson has participated in a range of gallery shows, both public and private, and is a grateful recipient of numerous grants and awards. As a respected performing and recording artist, Jay has played with Canadian alt-country trailblazers, the Blue Shadows, as well as underground folk heroes, Harold Nick and Mac Pontiac. His output of electronic music can be found under the title Come On Photon. Johnson continues to enjoy his teaching career at the Chabot Center for the Arts, where over the years he has encouraged hundreds of students in their artistry. Tonight he's joining us with a talk titled Dance with the Forlorn, which will discuss the connection found between the human body, common everyday objects, and their fragility. Really excited to learn more, and thank you everybody, and enjoy the talk. Jay, take it away.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you to the Kelowna Art Gallery for hosting this. It was quite a surprise to get a call from you guys, because I believe the pieces that you have were gifted. One was gifted and one was purchased sometime in the 90s. I don't remember the exact date, but I had a solo show there back when Clint Ronish was the curator. Clint went on to be a gallerist in Toronto, and our paths crossed again later on. I wouldn't mind if you would indulge me just reading a little kind of preamble to what I want to talk about, and it'll help focus me a little bit here. So in the description to the talk, I suggested that my encounter with a Oldsmobile at the corner of 15th and Arbutus had a huge influence on myself and my work. And I talk about that, as Victoria mentioned, as a dance with the forlorn. For me, I'm very interested in objects. So when and kind of contemporary objects as well as objects from the past, particularly domestic or really simple objects, tools and toys. The relationship that I have with the object in my own personal self is that I kind of see objects as embodiments, and the fact that a lot of my work involves pieces that are discarded or found, and often are broken. A lot of the association I have with those objects relates to my own association with my body. Particularly when objects sort of tend to weaken or falter, they become sad, they become problematic. You know, we've had this with automobiles and with, you know, objects in our lives, phones, computers. And there's always this kind of feeling that something needs to change or something needs to be improved. Rarely is repair part of the story nowadays, and that's of interest to me. You know, for me, when my body was damaged back in 1982, thank God for surgeons, thank God for the work that they did on me in order that I could continue to lead a productive life. But there was a lot of damage to my spirit. Like I had a lot of, I mean, I guess you might call it PTSD now, but I think back when it happened to me in the 80s, no real sense of that. So a lot of my difficulties were both physical and metaphysical, and so I'll just read this little business here about you know, when there's a human being is damaged, there's choices around restoration, and they're divided along the lines of the secular and the metaphysical. And of course, with the secular, the material is critical in a reassembling sense with sutures, plates, and screws. But the metaphysical repair is far less clear, even though it also needs to be considered. I find it regrettable that organized religion leaves a bad taste in the mouth of artists and patrons. But for me, its absence creates a dilemma for those seeking expression of the ideas surrounding it. Words like holy, joy, praise, salvation, deliverance have little traction in the visual arts, and at best they become targets for derision. In my case, the draw to such concepts needed to be tempered and concealed, not only from the viewer of my work, but in many ways from myself. I thought it best to keep my need for healing hidden, that any sign of chronic pain, mental illness, or spiritual seeking would be perceived as a sign of weakness and would serve no good purpose in my pursuit of an art career. Ironically, that weakness and that turmoil that I experienced over the years was fuel for productivity. And looking back, because I was doing a deep dive on some of my earlier works, I think some reasonably good work came out of that turmoil. So I'm going to go to slides now, and that means I have to share a screen. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I won't linger on this part of my story, but this is essentially what I was up against, and that was just like that part of my body, my shoulders, and concussion and knee, and basically the whole left side of my body was damaged in a tremendous way. And but before all that, I was like a really happy guy, and I had a really great upbringing in Kamloops, BC, and played music in bands up there, and had a really great time. Probably would have kept doing music had I not been hit by the car. I think that the accident took me away from playing music. The band that I was playing in at the time, they fired me after trying to get back to playing again. I just couldn't do it, and it was really interesting to me that when that was taken away from me, I struggled a lot with depression and addiction and some other difficulties. But fortunately, I had loving parents and support, and I ended up going back to school, and I went to Emily Carr. And I went to Emily Carr to study industrial design. And this is the kind of stuff I was working on. I was very intent on becoming an industrial designer. And I spent 3 pretty intense years working on that until the year before my graduation. I had a meltdown. I had an experience that, looking back on it now, it was kind of an awakening, and it was really powerful. As an instructor was talking to me about rendering and talking to me how to get just the right kind of shine on a button when you're making a clicky button on a toaster or God knows what, I realized that it meant nothing to me, and I was not interested in that work anymore. So I dropped out of industrial design, and I ended up switching over to the fine art department, and I had a super productive year in the fine art department. And I got to sip some tea, and I turned out some nice work, I thought, and I won some Helen Pitt Award or something, I can't remember. I kind of just came out of nowhere and did this huge body of work in my graduate year. One of the pieces that I did was this guy here. This is called Omen 186, and it was part of a larger installation. And then this piece eventually caught the attention of Monty Clark from the Monty Clark Gallery. He, as far as I know, still owns this piece. He purchased it from me early on, and he and a woman named Anne Rosenberg, who was quite a lovely character and a real connector of artists and people in the community. She invited me to show work at Monty Clark Gallery as guest curator, and the show was called Art Brew. So this is an example of what I was doing kind of after art college. I was working with boxes, and I was really interested in materials that had some kind of patina that I would either, find, or sometimes I would augment a little bit. Like, for example, the line that's just above the crank there, that's some horsehair insulation that I crammed into a crack, and I just sort of manipulate things with materials. So Art Brew, that was the Anne Rosenberg curated show, and I put some work in there. And what happened to me just before Art Brew, when Anne invited me to show at Monty Clark, I had sort of thought that the box idea had been done to death, and I wanted wanted to turn boxes upside down and make them more like stages. And it made a lot of sense to me as a performer. Like it took me back to, you know, playing drums and being on stages. So I was kind of really interested in keeping with the box idea, but in inverting it and making it a kind of a performance space. And so this is work all from Art Brut. So I'm you know, just a couple of years out of art college, and the show was really successful. I think I sold every piece except one 2D piece that I put up, and it was pretty heady times. And Monty, of course, was pretty excited and offered me a solo show. And this is what happened next. We put up Coping Mechanisms at Monty's space, which was on 3rd Avenue at the time. So Coping Mechanisms, I had to hit the ground running. I had to basically generate a lot of work for a solo show. And this is a sort of a partial installation shot. I have very few images from this time because we were working with film. But I really tried to play a lot with scale. I really was interested in making things so small that people had to kind of get close to see it. And it worked out well because I was still working at it at a very small studio space. So I tried to include some of the smaller works and sort of middle-sized works, all of them kinetic, all of them either electrically powered or spring powered. In this case, this was human powered. You could push this one. Yeah, so this was called Extroversion. And this is in a private collection in Vancouver somewhere. And this was, we stood at a turning point. This is a very dear piece to me because that box that you see that it was built from was actually my father's nail box. He kept nails in a shed at our home in Kamloops. And somehow I ended up with that box, and it turned into a piece. This is a piece called Beautiful Burden, and it was purchased by Diane Evans, the lovely Diane Evans, whose association with the Presentation House Gallery. She was a great supporter of mine in the early days of my sculptural practice. And this piece is called Vigilance. This piece was purchased by a couple somewhere in the east of the United States. We had a fun time shipping that one. But yeah, that's Vigilance. So that show was very successful in terms of, you know, being able to sell work and got press, and things were just cooking along. Keep in mind that I'm very naive about this whole process. I hadn't really been around galleries. I'd been a musician, and frankly, you know, it was a shock to me that I was even showing with a gallerist. So by the time Coping Mechanisms was done, Monty said, okay, so when are we going to do another one? And it was pretty much fast track that I had to come up with more work, and Apparatus was what we ended up generating. And Apparatus was in fact the show that ended up touring up to Kelowna Art Gallery. We sold some of the work at Monty's space, but I had other stuff that I was in the midst of building. So some of it went up to Kelowna, and some of it was new work that was specific to the Kelowna show. This piece is called Big Top. It's got a speak and spell inside of it, and it randomly picks words to say. And I don't know if you've ever had a speak and spell, but the voice in a very gruff sort of way says, say it, raincoat. It kind of does that kind of thing. And it's quite loud, and it's a lot of fun in a space. Geez, I don't remember the title of that one. This was called Lucifer. When you turn the crank, if you look in the eyepiece, there's this lovely detailed plastic devil character. Strongman Complex, that was in the show. I'm not sure if this was in the show because I think this got purchased just before the show. This is Jelly. This was the piece that you have in the show currently called Providence, I think. So it's yeah. So two solo shows in, and now Monty, God bless him, he's after me for a third one, and keep in mind that I'm dealing with sort of like a lot of physical difficulties and still a bit scrambled in the head. You know, if I want to put it politely, a little bit scrambled. Still kind of coming to terms with everything that's happened to me in that PTSD kind of way. So this body of work got kind of dark, and it marked a kind of a turning point for me in the sense that I wanted to make things more like installations. I wasn't as interested in selling like little objects to people. I wanted to make a more unified statement. So this piece had a video element to it. It had a narrative film that I co-created with my dear friend Clancy Dennehy. And this work was kind of rigged up so that when you entered the space, the video would be running. There were chapters to the story, and then between the chapters, the kinetic objects around the room would kick in and sort of make kind of whispery clanking sounds. And all in all, kind of very spook show. It was very dark and very kind of, the soundtrack to the film was very like kind of lo-fi horror movie. This was a piece at the back of the room where the speaker sort of let go these really kind of detuned calliope sounds while the wheeled character goes in circles in a kind of tippy way. This was a piece in the back space of the gallery. This piece is called Harbinger. This piece showed up in a couple of different places. It was sent to Spain for ARCO, and we got to attend ARCO, and this piece was in the booth at ARCO with Monty's gallery, and he, after a little while, didn't want me to turn it on anymore, because what would happen is people would come into the space, they'd watch it go through a cycle, and then they'd leave the space. It was a little bit too much like a performance, and so I didn't actually get to run it too much in Spain. Here's a close-up of it. Essentially, in a very slow and methodical way, the bat pulls back and kind of locks itself in position, and then with a fairly loud bang, the doll figure drops into the path of the bat, and then there's a period of maybe 10 or 15 seconds where you're waiting, and then the bat releases and swings and knocks the character, you know, in a fairly good arc, swinging. Also, at the same moment it gets hit, the doll is retracted up in, you know, a few inches up, so it doesn't hit the bat on the swinging back. It was a very effective piece. I'm trying to remember where it is now. I can't. Okay, and these are one of the small wall pieces around Nocturne. It's just little kinetic guys that were kind of tied into the idea of the film. And this was a piece called Scout. Still interested in wheeled things and small things, and this was on the invite for Nocturne. And yeah, I think I think if it's okay with you, I'd like to try and show a little video clip. Is that okay? How's our time?
Yes, yes, I think we're still good for time.
You know what? I'm just going to keep going. Is it okay if I keep going? Because sure. I think the video is good, but I'm just gonna keep going for a sec.
All right.
Thank you. So yeah, so after that, I had a falling out with Monty, and the reason being is I got invited to show in Toronto with Clint Ronish. It wasn't really a falling out. It was just more or less like you either show with Clint or you show with me. So I decided to go to Clint's gallery in Toronto, and I had a new space to work out of. So I had this really big space, and I was all excited about making work in this big space. This was down in Gastown at 52 East Cordova Street. Rough part of town. The space used to leak all the time. Like water would just come pouring in at strange moments. It was very intense being there, but I was really excited about the space. So I built a bunch of work, built the crates, shipped it to Toronto. It was my first experience with shipping stuff sort of a long distance. And this is some of the work in the space, beautiful space that he used to have on Queen Street. And you can see at this moment, I'm also starting to play with more contemporary materials. I'm kind of like still using found objects, but being a little more open to this is called, oh, what is this called? I can't remember. This is a double exposure, so you can see the bird figure is tipped over. This one, there's quite a long wait before the little hammer on the back of the bird strikes it really quickly and really with quite a loud bang, and it falls forward on its beak. Then very gently, it slowly raises itself back up. This piece, I can't remember the name of this one. This was purchased in Toronto. It was amazing to me that it made the trip out there. It's very fragile. Yeah, that's near the invite. This is part of a larger work. This is called 5 stations. So this is one of the 5 stations. It's a detail. This is what I called the motivator. It was in the basement of the gallery, and the strings went up through a hole in the floor and drove the 5 stations. This is another example of some of the contemporary materials I'm using. Here's Clint and his gal cat, and here's giving me the finger, which to me was like funny and also kind of like an omen. This is me at the end of the installation, and again, I'll just come back to this idea of being really physically beat up by the work, and it was after that show that I decided it would probably be better for me if I didn't work with a gallery. Mainly because I'd sort of run out of steam, and also the work that was in the Clint Roner's gallery, I'm very careful about kinetic work, that I try and make it as bomb-proof as possible, but we had some trouble with the 5 stations piece, and so it created a lot of friction between me and Clint in the sense that, you know, I told him like I'll fly out there, but he was kind of, you know, it was kind of like he would try and fix it, and he wasn't very adept at that. And so basically, you know, we basically decided to call the relationship off, and it was kind of a relief for me. At the same time, I was the lease was coming up on that big studio that I had. I'd had it for about 5 years, I guess. And the fellow I shared it with, Mac Pontiac, he decided he didn't want to renew it. So yeah, so I started gathering just before the lease. I gathered some work up, and I got a show at Evergreen Cultural Center. And this is before I put Bundy in my name. There's about a 10 zillion Jay Johnsons in the world, so I use my middle name. This was a really lovely space to work in. I love the floors, and I did my best to occupy the space in a way that was playful and interesting. Robin Lawrence wrote a really lovely piece in the Georgia Strait about this work. Mainly, she was enthused with the way the kids interacted with it. Lots of kids came through that space. This was a drawing machine, and I sort of started thinking about drawing machines at this point. And this was like called a portable Mandala Machine. There's Harbinger in the back there. He's made another appearance. And in the foreground, this piece called Decoy, which I'm very fond of. And I think Linda Chinfin has that now. She's works with Stan Douglas. Just some details of a piece called The North Pole. And this was the invite piece. This is called Outcast. Now I might try and jump over to the video at this point. So that piece, Outcast, was kind of like part of a drawing thing that I became interested in trying out drawings. These were some small drawing machines that made large scale drawings on paper with ink. They were process drawings that took, maybe sometimes 2-3 hours to create. I do have a video that I just put up documenting these works, but I haven't got it on it's on Vimeo. So if you want to go look at how these were done. I was really interested in the density of these, but I also got interested in ones that had more space. So this one's quite lovely that way. And then I had a residency at the Shadbolt Center, and I was doing these small scale drawings where I was using a video camera and not actually looking at the drawing. I was looking at a screen while I made them. I made a series of drawings of everyday objects. And I also constructed a sort of a larger scale mandala machine and generated a bunch of mandalas for that residency. Also was working on, these aren't drawings, but they were kind of like a spiral drawing using cardboard. Quickly, Mary's Room, Richmond Art Gallery got in touch, and I was able to do some work for them. Another nice space with a beautiful floor. These pieces were generated on that Cordova Street studio. Again, sort of more contemporary materials with a video component. Sort of, reoccurring themes, reoccurring aesthetic. From that show, Jordan Strom from Surrey Art Gallery got in touch and encouraged me to generate some work for their tech lab. This is from a show called Being Still Life. This show was very much about sound, and the control surface you see there, the people coming to the show could hit those buttons and basically orchestrate the sounds of the pieces. Kids had a ball with that one. And this is a last sort of show I've done some years ago now, and it was I was interested in concrete music, and I was interested in making a machine that would generate sort of the idea of concrete music being sort of juxtapositions of disassociated sounds. And so I built this machine that basically is a triggering device, and that it was triggering a computer to launch samples. And this is my dear friend Clancy, videographer, artist, and he's video documenting this piece, which again, I'm not going to put up because you can go to Vimeo and look up my name and you can see that work there. So I think that's about it for my slides. Going back to the room.
Excellent.
Yeah, any questions, Victoria?
No, I think so far we're good, but we'd love to see a little peek of your studio if that's okay with you. I think we've got a decent amount of time.
Okay, so I'm just going to mute this guy and I'll go and fire up the tablet.
Sounds good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sounds loud and clear.
Okay. So I've got the fisheye on here because it's quite a small space, but I will take the fisheye off. I just wanted to give you a sort of an overview of the space. It's kind of like I said, second bedroom in an apartment, and my wife has been so patient with me converting it into a workspace. I've got lots of shelving, lots of shelving and some more shelving, and I've got a nice balcony space here so that if I have to do some noisy, smoky work, I can do it out there, and more shelving and more shelving. And here we are. I'll take this guy off and get a more realistic view. And what I'd like to show you is maybe just my dear friend Guido suggested I should just kind of get a little bit in on some of the work. Like that's a piece that's actually kind of needing some repair. A big part of my practice these days is just sort of keeping stuff going. Sometimes people who have bought works call me up and say this isn't working, and I do that. And I also try to, keep making work, although I've slowed down a little bit over the past few years. I'm 63 years old now, and I don't have that same spit and vinegar I used to have. But I'd just like to show you this piece because one of the things about this work that I do is sometimes I have pieces that I'm never quite satisfied with, and I end up keeping them until they can sort of become something that I can get behind. Here, I'll just take the tripod out, excuse me. And I'm just gonna hold and plug in this. I'll just back up a bit. Okay. So this is quite a slow movement and there's not much sound, so I can talk a little bit about it. This piece was originally designed for the Nocturne show, and it never went in the show. It was in the film, but it was never really working to my satisfaction, and it needed another element. So just in the past few months, I came up with the sort of solution to all of it. So interested in really slow movements and interested in pieces that have cycles that are, a minute or two longer, and really interested in how people respond to that length of time, whether they can sit and watch the whole thing or not, or whether they just get too antsy, because it's amazing how I'm going to shut that off, how long a minute can feel. And here's one other one. I'll just show you this one, and then we can go to like a question period. I have to pull back a little bit. So this is another one that was sort of around for a long time and never made any sense. And actually, my dear wife helped me out with some of the problems with this one. And also my friend Clancy, he helped me out too with this one. Yeah. I'll just finish with this. I've got a real fondness for clockwork motors, things you can wind up. And on Craigslist, just a little while ago, I got a whole box of music box wind-ups, which I've used before in my pieces, where I take the little bumps that pluck the tines, and I grind them down and kind of make my own tunes, and also take the tines right out so that I can use it so they can use it for just a drive motor. Scout and attraction compulsion, those are the small wheeled pieces. They used a similar motor. So I think that's about it. I will go back to the other computer because I have an easier time of working that one. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks for showing us around, Jay. Really, really cool stuff in there.
Yeah, it's a fun space.
Yeah, we do have a few questions that have started to compile, so I will ask them when you get settled. Awesome, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for showing us around and for the slides and giving us a better idea, a better understanding of your beginnings and how everything has come to fruition. It's some beautiful work to see, even online. I think it translates really well. So we'll begin diving into some questions. We've got a few people that have already started up the chat here. So Pat has asked, I think with the first kinetic sculpture that you showed us, they're asking what part is the solution to what you started with. So you did say the one with the hand and the key, there was a bit of a challenge with that one at first. So what was, I guess, your difficulties prior to fixing it?
Sorry, yeah. The thing about it was that it just had the one element. It just had the arm coming up and going down. So that other mechanism with the key didn't exist. And it was kind of nice in a minimal kind of way, but it just didn't feel like there was enough happening. And I also didn't like that most of the workings were internal. So by adding that other arm, then some string came out around the outside of the box, and it just became a little more interesting composition for me. Plus, that moment when the key meets the hand, there's some tension about that didn't exist before when the hand just went up by itself.
Well, it creates like a story too. You're almost wondering, what does this arm want to open? What's the key for? You start to think. Okay, I'll move on to the next question here. Vicki and Todd are asking, can you tell us more about the materials you work with? Is everything found, new, or a mix?
Yeah, I have a sort of like a collector energy, and I'm not a hoarder, but I frequent thrift stores, and I'm not afraid of jumping into a dumpster, and there's sort of a feeling of waiting for things to come to me, as opposed to going to look for things. Although the last piece I did, the music concrete machine, I was delighted to be able to go online and find pulleys and find certain mechanisms that I really needed, and I couldn't, run around to even a hardware store. I couldn't find those things. So it's no news to anybody who's bought things off the internet before, but it was kind of a new experience for me to actually search for a particular pulley in a particular size, and so that's kind of opened up a little bit more possibility for me. But the materials I'm most excited about are definitely things I've found, things I've stumbled on. Yeah.
Wonderful. Annabelle here is asking what the meaning of the cross is on the second sculpture you showed us.
Well, I don't have to say it's a loaded image, it's a loaded object. For me, if I go back to my experience with my car accident, is that I think every human has some kind of cross to bear, in the sense that there's something difficult about life. I've spent some time visiting. I had a friend who was. I have several friends who have had worse accidents than me, and I see the dignity and the strength that they carry themselves, and so for me, the cross, it's such a loaded image. That may be part of the reason why I haven't really offered that piece into the world, because it's very personal, and I don't really want to come off as being someone to espouse any kind of particular religious belief. But I do think the iconography around Christianity is super powerful, and in this particular case, I really like the action of the cross being dragged, and it feels like it's going to be set up right, but then it doesn't, and it's dragged some more. When it tipped off the edge of the table there, hadn't really intended that, but that's kind of an interesting event as well.
Yeah. Very, I mean, of course, when you put any sort of religious iconography like that, there's going to be lots of meaning behind it. Good question. Thank you for that, Annabelle. Next, we've got John. He's asking, what was the name of the drawing machine? He said, I heard the word Mandela. Just wondering what that is.
Yeah, hi, John. Yeah, it was a portable Mandala machine. So the idea behind that first one was that you could carry it in a small suitcase, and which I have this lovely metal suitcase that I can take it with me. And I have a little, they're done on just regular sort of recipe cards, the images. And so there's some cams and some, like, so basically I can take the suitcase and set it up and generate these small images. I have a little file holder that maybe has like several hundred of them that I've made over time. And the last time I showed that piece was at Lana Lou's, which is like a kind of a lovely restaurant bar place where people play music, and they had an art night that this friend of mine, Tate Modern, put on. And I just set up a little card table and made mandalas for the evening, and sold a few of them, but it was more just the fun of being there. So that's a portable mandala machine, and then the larger one with the turntables is basically just kind of an outgrowth of that idea, and that's also a mandala machine.
Cool. Next, we've got Jennifer. She's asking, what are some of your music projects now? Be interested to know more about your music endeavors as well.
Yeah, so thanks, Jennifer. I'm working with a fellow by the name of Robert Connolly Farr, and he's from Bolton, Mississippi, and he's been living in Vancouver now for a little over 10 years. When I first met Connolly, he asked if I wanted to play in a band with him, and at that point in my life, I was kind of done with that. I sort of thought that I didn't want to get involved in a project like that anymore, like this idea of a band. But it turns out that he had some really good songs, and so we started working together, and we're still working together like 10 years later. He's just put out an incredible record. I encourage people to listen to it, and you can go to Bandcamp and listen to the whole album. Robert Connolly Farr, the name of the album is called Country Supper, and I played drums on that, and it's a beautiful album, and I was so excited to be able to do it because I've had sort of a bumpy road with studio work, like being a musician in a studio. And part of that relates to my injury. I had a lot of trouble with my left foot because I had a plate in my hip. And some years ago, I had the plate taken out, and my drumming just kind of got better right away. So I got to do this recording with Connolly, and it was sort of like the first time in my recording career where I could say, okay, I'm actually playing drums quite well now. Like all the other times I would listen and go, not feeling really confident about it. So the plate coming out was like a real revelation for me, and it coincided with it, working with this lovely man, Robert Connolly Farr.
Cool. Yeah, another question here from Amy, along the same lines. She's asking to tell us more about how music informs your practice. So do you find that there's much crossover between your art practice and your music career?
I've had the hardest time trying to reconcile those two. I kind of like feel like what ends up happening is I get really excited about music, and I don't want to do any art, and then it goes vice versa. I think the last sculptural project I did with the music concrete machine was the first time I kind of really was trying to make those two disciplines join together. Also, the come on photon stuff. I've been making sort of little short videos and short films using my music as soundtrack for the short films, and that's a way. Like I'm pretty introverted. Like a lot of the work that I do doesn't sort of go out into the world because I'm pretty self-contained and pretty easily self-amused. Like I can get happy doing something, and honestly, I don't care if anybody else sees it, which is a bit of a problem. But especially around the music, the composing that I've done is always been kind of like my own little happy space. Yeah, but I don't really know. Oh, I will say this one thing, Amy. You know where it's really showed up. The drums to me are some of the most beautiful sculptural objects you will ever see. Like when you see a set of drums on the stage, or when I see a set of drums on the stage, I just really can't help but stare at them. I find them intensely beautiful, and I have since the first drum set I ever saw, which was probably about 10 or 12 years old in Kamloops. Some instructor had a drum set and brought it to school, and I was just bowled over by the object itself, never mind the sounds that it made.
Yeah, the creative mind, definitely, you just see things differently. Everything has a whole new meaning, takes new shape, new form.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll move on here to a question from Pat. Do you look for objects when you have an idea or inspiration, or are you inspired by the objects you discover, or is it a mix of both?
Hi, Pat. Yeah, there's no clear path to any of that. I was at a hospital auxiliary thrift store the other day, and I saw this beautiful wood patina. I don't know what they're called, but they're for racking up billiard balls, that kind of triangle shape. It was gorgeous. It was just like, oh, it's such a beautiful piece of wood. And immediately I wanted to take it home, but I couldn't, like nothing went bing, so I had to walk away. It used to be I would just buy it. Like I wouldn't think twice, but I'm kind of a little more selective, and I still have stuff in my studio that I haven't dealt with that needs to be. So the inspiration it comes generally from the object, but sometimes from the discovery of an object, like an object that I have versus one that I just stumble on.
Pat saying, you need to scout out my barn. So many treasures. That sounds like a great invitation.
I know where you live.
There you go. Watch out, Pat. Okay, so if anybody has any more questions, feel free to type them in, but we're getting close to the end of our time here, and I think we've answered everybody's questions to the best of our abilities. So Jay, is there anything you would like to add before we tie this up for the evening?
No, just much thanks to you, and also I wanted to thank Clea and geez, I forgot the gentleman's name. They did some repair work on Beautiful Beacon, the piece in your show, and we had to do that remotely, and by the looks of things, it's working really well. So I wanted to thank them for doing that. Saved me a trip up to the Coquihalla, and yeah, and I really look forward to seeing more work. It's nice to reconnect with Kelowna Art Gallery again, and now that I've got you back on the radar, I'll be checking out the work that you're presenting.
Oh, so excellent! So excited to hear that, and I'll let Matt and Clea know that you said thank you.
Yeah. Big thanks to them. Big thanks.
Absolutely, it is running beautifully and running smoothly. And for those of you that are in or near Kelowna, You can check out those two kinetic sculptures by Jay up until Sunday, when this exhibition will sadly be coming down, but making room for something new and exciting for everybody to check out. So if you have any questions, or if there's anything else you'd like to find out, feel free to visit our website. And this will be posted hopefully within the next day or two. I'll have it up online for everybody to check out. Okay, I think that's all for me tonight. Thank you, Jay, for joining us. Thank you, everybody else, for coming out, and have a good evening.